Hello and welcome to the API Chronicles, Unlocking the Future, a live celebration of APIs hosted by Marqeta. Today, we're delving into the world of user experience and looking at it through the lens of banks versus fintechs. As the financial landscape continues to evolve rapidly, traditional banks find themselves facing formidable competition from the more agile and innovative fintech sector. In this discussion, we'll explore the contrasting approaches, strengths, and challenges faced by these two players in delivering exceptional user experiences to their customers, and we'll touch on accessibility, personalization, trust and convenience, and gain valuable insights into the future of customer experience in banking and fintech. As this is live, we're taking questions from the audience, so please drop them into the comments as and when you come up with them. My name's Jazz Shah. I'm a fintech product consultant and founder of Bitzel. I've helped several fintechs and FS companies design and shape digital and product strategy, and I've worked on many end-to-end customer journeys in the process. But it's not just me. Joining me in this user experience focused discussion, we've got two seasoned experts, Mark O'Keefe and not Peter Ramsey, but the brilliant and wonderful Hannah Hilali. Thanks both.
Hi.
Before we get straight into the UX discussion, can you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your background and your expertise with UX? I know, Hannah, you've got potentially a fire alarm, so let's start with you, Mark.
Thank you. So Mark O'Keefe, I run a small specialist consultancy called Optima Consultancy. One of the things we do and have done for the last 6-7 years is run a number of banking app studies. Getting a bit of feedback, I think, aren't we? That entails having lots of cards. You can see some of my expired cards over the background there, but we have pretty much every bank account you could have in the UK. I look like a bit of a fraudster when I carry those live cards around with me. So we've been tracking sort of that digital transformation now, both for established players and the advent of new fintechs for a number of years. We also produce one in Germany as well. So we kind of got that different perspective on what's going on in different markets. So that's kind of my background and expertise.
Amazing.
Luckily, the fire alarm has finished. Fantastic timing. 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. So my name is Hannah Hilali, and I currently work in the strategy and innovation team at Kin + Carter. If you haven't heard of Kin + Carter, it's a digital transformation company that exists to build a world that works better for everyone, which is very lofty goals. We were the first B Corp listed on the stock exchange, so we're trying to walk the talk. And in terms of financial services, we work with banks, fintechs, payment network providers, government entities in some places across the US, UK, and also in the EU as well. Before that, I worked at 11FS, where I spent possibly thousands of hours doing projects for banking clients, looking at the UX of both their competitors in terms of banks and also their competitors in terms of fintechs as well, and giving them advice on where they could improve their offerings. And then before that, I spent a lot of time in financial inclusion in emerging markets, which is actually what made me really interested in financial services in the first place, because the impact that financial services has on our lives and the ability to achieve what it is that we want to achieve.
Very cool. Thank you both. So let's start with the obvious place, which is, what is UX? I think the kind of biggest area of misconception I see is that people think UX is just UI, and UX is actually the end-to-end interaction between the customer and the business, from knowing about the brand, seeing them on a landing page or a website, all the way up until actually offboarding. So it'd be good to hear your kind of definitions or maybe some misconceptions about UX.
Yeah, happy if you want to dive in first, Hannah.
Yeah, I can go. I think that one of the biggest misconceptions for me, which I imagine everyone else will find as well, is the mix up of UX and UI. I think it's really easy to look at an app and say, wow, this looks modern, it feels modern. It feels like it would be a good experience, but actually then when you get into it and you're like, can I actually achieve what it is I want to achieve? Is this easy and intuitive for me to use? Is it joyful or delightful to use? I think that's the biggest misconception. It's not just, does it look pretty? It's also, how does it help me achieve what I want to achieve?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We can talk about jobs to be done and the like, isn't it? But there's so much more to it than that. And I think what's interesting for me when you kind of look at sort of fintech and banks is again, if we think about what these phones, these apps are trying to do, they're almost in a way replicating some of that face-to-face interaction people had in the past, or the telephone interaction people had in the past. And I think that's kind of the interesting aspect of how does that make you feel? Do you achieve what you want to be able to do there? And many bad UX experiences operating lots of accounts over the last few years. So I think that kind of brings it to life as well.
So I guess going off the back of that, what do you see as the biggest benefit of great customer experiences? Is it clear and beneficial outcomes for customers? Is it both for customers and the business? What's that big benefit of good CX?
I mean, for me, it's all of it now. So, I mean, I post quite a bit on LinkedIn every now and again, and I kind of feel like I'm copy and pasting the next round of bank branch closures. So I think we're heading towards a path where I think we'll have utility banking in the sense of the shared bank network. So how do you differentiate? And I guess the way you differentiate your service, your offering, is going to be through that digital channel. So I think that's where it becomes really important. So what's a hygiene factor? What's table stakes? What must you be able to do? And where can you wow customers? I think Hannah mentioned that in terms of that feeling that you get. So actually, we've seen a lot of that develop over the years, that there are things now you just come to expect to be able to do. And I think the other interesting aspect for me is where our benchmarks come from. So for me, the benchmarks aren't coming necessarily from fintechs and banks. It's actually, what does my social media account look like? What does my Amazon account look like? What does my Uber account look like? And that's where we're dealing every day in these apps, and we're getting an expectation about how we expect that to look and feel, and how we expect to operate it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think I was thinking about it earlier. In terms of onboarding, there are still banks in the UK that you actually have to go and verify your documents in person, which is just insane. Like, when I think of, as like a millennial, when I think of signing up for a financial product, I almost want it to be almost as easy as it is to sign up for Instagram, or to sign up for LinkedIn, or to sign up for whatever other app that I'm using. It's, apart from doing some sort of eKYC process, I want it to be as easy, as quick, as seamless as everything else that I use my phone for.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. And I had my phone stolen last week. Actually, I was in London, and it was some beggars who did a distraction technique at a restaurant and swiped the phone, and that gave me a great set of user experience to say I've got whatever it is, 40 cards inside my wallet. What does that look like when I want to put them back on the wallet? And maybe the experience isn't as good with an Android device as it is with Apple, but actually I've got to install those again, and 2 or 3 of them aren't now back in my wallet because I've got to call up the bank. And it's like, well, why have I got to do that? And that it just shows up, I guess, different approaches there, and it may surprise us, I think, to say, goodness me, in this day and age, I've got to go and make a phone call now, and go through that process. I expect, as you said, Hannah, to just be able to do certain things, and I think that's where, for me, some of that key user experience is getting defined by non-financial players. They're setting that bar in terms of look and feel and approach and speed. And I think that's also, look, you mentioned it, and Hannah, I think you look, oh, there we go. I heard someone's put about, it should be as easy as porting your Instagram over to friends. There's a fair point there, but there's also, look, everyone's got their own view of user experience. And actually, maybe I want friction. Maybe I don't want it to be really easy to just port my, I don't want the frauds to be able to do that. I'm worried. I want the friction. That's interesting dynamic, I think, with financial services, and it is generational as well. I certainly know my 12-year-old daughter, incredibly impatient, won't even wait for something to load, a bus tracking app. I'm like, look, you can see it's just doing the circle. And no, tap, tap, tap. So I think, again, we've got different experiences and demands from different customers as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point from Josh, and I guess there's a kind of big wave of digital identity conversations and partnerships happening. NatWest and OneID, Lloyds and Yoti. So I think once we're in that bank-led digital identity, I think it will become easier. It will become almost as easy as just creating a Threads account using an Instagram authentication port. I don't think we're there yet. But we will get there. I think going off the back of that. Sorry, Anna. Go off the back of that point that that Mark made about, I guess, hygiene factors. Are there specific hygiene features and processes that you see differences between banks and fintechs?
I actually think the benchmark for hygiene is moving constantly. So a while ago, probably at the beginning of this year, I was doing a project for a savings and investment firm, and they wanted to know, what are the fintechs doing, what are the incumbents doing, and to help people save money. And one of the things I was really surprised at was in like a year or so, all of these incumbent banks now offer roundups. They now offer places where you can create savings goals, where you can set different, like get a calculator to tell you how much you need to save by when, set up automatic transfers, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And I was thinking it's interesting because that was like one of Monzo's propositions of like making it really easy to save and manage your money. And now it's just becoming a thing that everyone's doing. So then it's like, okay, so what's the next experience that we have to bring to customers? What's the next thing that we have to do? Because I don't feel like we've actually cracked helping people truly manage their money. I think it's better, but I feel like there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that. I think there's a reducing friction play, which is a lot of banks and fintechs have been really great at. So they've, OTP and magic links are kind of the big game changer of authenticating your email address and phone. But I agree. I think there's a lot more that could be done other than just creating a space and kind of siphoning some money off. Yeah, I agree. What about yourself, Mark? What do you think? Hygiene factors.
I think it's interesting because sort of pots or vaults or what's the other branding that you spaces, whatever you want to call it. I think it's really interesting because. And we see a lot of this, I think, in contrast with banks and fintechs. They may put some functionality in, but actually the functionality in itself isn't a good user experience. So just because there is a separate account, if you like, great, but actually it's clunky, or it doesn't update instantly, or it doesn't have the same visual and look and feel. Card controls is a great example, led by the fintechs. I mean, it's been around as a technology for years, but it was actually Monzo and others that brought that to the front. But, I laugh and joke about this one without naming and shaming, but, there's a very big banking group that have card controls. But if what I want to do, and that job's to be done question, what I want to do is, I've lost my card, I want to freeze it. Is it buried in a function in a menu, or is it right in front of me? Do I have to do 5 or 6 clicks? Have I got the compliance department that's giving 6 or 7 warnings that say, well, you may freeze this, but it won't stop this type of transaction. It won't stop this. Who cares? Actually, what's the customer trying to do? Trying to protect themselves. And I think the same is true when we look at a lot of those hygiene factors in our sort of reports and studies. We kind of call them table stakes. What is it you expect to be able to do? And there's a difference between, I saw a comment come up there on open banking, but there's a difference between being able to offer something as a feature and it to actually be in a good user experience. And open banking is a great example. Many of the banks now will bring in your accounts from others. But how many of them, especially when you look at traditional places, won't even add those numbers up for you? So great, you can bring in 3 different accounts for me, but I've got to do the maths now and add up the 3 balances. Well, surely you can do that for me. What's the point of me bringing it in otherwise? Surely you can do the analytics. So I think there's a difference between, I think, someone almost doing it because they want the tick box. Yes, we offer that now. But the reality is they're not delivering a good user experience. Yeah,
totally agree. I guess this to kind of bring it into focus for everyone. What fintech or traditional bank do you look at as a great example of UX, and why do you see them as a great example of UX? I will go first because I'm worried that you might pick it off and I'll have no other alternative. So, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Wise as again UX end to end, not just in-app experience, the onboard, like the pre-onboarding experience, customer support around different factors. But I think Wise's UX stems from the top. They've always had a clear vision and mission statement. And they've evolved that over time, but it's always been clear and it's always been publicized. And I think just the way the way Wise's in-app and out-of-app experience works is it's kind of, for me, a perfect example of how to do UX across tone of voice, UI, marketing campaigns, vision, and product strategy. Do it really well. What about yourself, Hannah? What do you think?
Mine is Up, which is an Australian fintech, and if anyone's watching that knows me will know this. It's kind of a bit of a fintech crush, I think. I just really like them. We came across them, and I think they're, in terms of the way they build their products, the features, the UX, it's all geared around, like Mark mentioned, the like customer jobs to be done. So they've got some really interesting products and features. They've got like this thing called May Buy, which is supposed to be the antithesis to BNPL. So they found that most of their customers, when they save for something and then purchase it, they feel this sense of joy. Whereas if they buy something using BNPL, they actually feel kind of guilty, and actually they don't really like feel the same sense of satisfaction. So they created this product where you can copy and paste the URL of a product that you want to buy, put it into a space, set up all your savings and stuff like that, set up loads of different ones because we have more than one. And then you can check on how well it's doing. And then because you've got this image of the thing that you're putting your money aside to save for, it then means that you're less likely to take the money out again. They've also got other really cool things like helping you. And if you think about like their target demographic, it's going to probably be millennials. So all the products are kind of built towards that. But they've got another product around saving for a deposit. So not only are you looking at, okay, how could I save for this deposit, but then you're also able to input data from like, maybe my parents will give me like £10,000 or something, or $10,000 towards it. How do I incorporate that? Maybe I'll sell some investments or some shares that I've got in a year's time when I've got enough money. How can I track that inside that bucket of what I'm saving for? So I think they're just really good at understanding what's important to customers and then building products, UX features, everything else around it to help them achieve that goal. So yeah, they're my fintech crush.
It's now I'm going to cop out in a way and give a typical consultant answer, because it depends. So it depends what you mean by favorite, and if we're talking about me personally as an individual, who do I bank with? Where does my salary get paid? That goes into Starling, both from a personal perspective and a business side. If I look at kind of Emma, I've got a bit of a soft, maybe a fintech crush if I use Hannah's thing. So I think kind of their the way they help you kind of holistically manage that money, and they're branching out into lots of other things now in terms of saving and lending and so on, and moving money around. I think there's a really nice way that they communicate and talk to customers. Revolut's a funny one because they've changed and overhauled their UX and their design of their home screen so many times now as they build out that super app, and that again becomes sometimes problematic because you're like, well, I got used to that, and now I'm kind of having to adapt and change. So I do think, look, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? So me personally, I'm that Starling customer, so I'd probably say that's where, if you were putting a gun to my head, I'd say that's kind of what I would choose. But Klarna's a great, for me, a great app as well. Gives a real, again, going down that AI route, very buzzwordy, but I do see that we'll come on to it, I'm sure. But personalization, that customization, I think Hannah, you mentioned it. So helping you do what you want to do. Well, actually, I don't want to see that balance on my screen. I don't want to see that. What I want is a shortcut. I want to be able, ideally, actually, you should just present that for me. Realize that I make payments to 3 or 4 people regularly. So put those as shortcuts for me. I never look at my mortgage balance. Goodness me. I still have my mortgage with HSBC. If I log into my HSBC banking app, I don't want to see my mortgage balance every time I log in. Why would I? It's depressing. And so then, I think that app that kind of moves and with your own kind of life journey, I think is what draws it to you. But ultimately for me, it's probably Starling.
Just love that reminder of the debt that you have hanging over your head every time you open your phone. On the
Whereas
point
what they
of-
should do, of course, is say, actually, Mark, we recognise you're spending too much on Starbucks or whatever. If you put that one Starbucks a week onto your mortgage, you could save X, Y, and Z. You know, but of course they don't. They just say, look, here's your account number, because of course I need to know my mortgage account number every day as well. So yeah, a little bit of a bugbear, I think, that some banks are still showing in effect, an electronic version of a paper statement on their home screen.
On the point of subjectivity, I think the Revolut example is really interesting. So, like before this webinar, I asked on a Slack channel at work, like, what are some examples of like really good UX, really bad UX that you can share? And Revolut was actually one that one of my colleagues mentioned, which is weird because I quite like Revolut because it's got this like pull down function where you can then search for whatever you want, which is similar to how the iOS screen works. So it's just how I never search for apps anymore. I just type in the search. So I quite like it because it mirrors that experience for me. But then he was saying, actually, I hate it. I can't find anything. I find it really confusing. I don't know where things are. So it's really interesting, just like the subjectivity of what good UX is. There are like fundamental principles that you can adhere to, but at the end of the day, people's personal preferences are always going to come into it as well.
I don't want to call this person out, but is there a generational gap between you and the person who?
No, we're the same age.
Okay, right. Okay. Because I guess
an Android user or iOS user?
Yeah.
iOS. I actually looked over on his desk to double check.
But and you hit the nail on the head, which is what I said earlier, Hannah, which is, where you like it because that's how you search on iOS. So it's kind of almost like some of that learned behavior or the way you're doing other things. It's well, actually, that's what I come to expect or I'm used to doing within, within the app itself. I think, that's another area I think we've definitely looked at in the studies, which is more and more stuff is getting put inside the banking apps, both in fintechs building out their proposition and retail banks, established banks getting people out of telephony and branch network. So how do you find stuff? How do you know if a new features come in? How do you solve that problem you're trying to do? And even you might say, again, you'd call it as a table stake, but surely I should be able to search for something in the app. And yet, how many of them don't offer that functionality is just like, is just bizarre. Again, that's kind of a hygiene factor in so many other things for us. Yeah,
I guess you mentioned, Mark, the log into your banking app. You don't want to see your mortgage. I'm a HSBC mortgage customer as well, and I don't like seeing my current account, my savings, and my mortgage all in one place. But is there a bit like I feel like banks do get a hard time, and I guess it's because fintechs have shown them what good UX can be, and banks are still playing catch up. Do you have some sympathy because you look at the internal structure of lots of these banks, it doesn't look like you have any sympathy. You look at the internal structure of some of these banks, and the mortgages team and the mortgages UX team and the mortgages product team are very separate to the current accounts team and the savings team and the investments team. And I guess the app is, to a degree, loads of different teams coming together and vying for interface space. So I mean, do you have some sympathy? And again, banks have been around for most of these CMA9 have been around for over 100 years. So it's a growing Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Shipping
so look,
container.
I mean, you're probably in a group of one if you've got sympathy for banks right now. I'm not sure there's a lot of people with sympathy in terms of saving rates and the like. But is it hard, some of what they're trying to do? Absolutely. Legacy, both legacy culture, not just the technology side. And you look, if we get time and I can do some share screen maybe towards the end, that example I gave on card controls, saying the customer wants to freeze a card, give them a freeze a card button. That's kind of the logical thing to do. Everyone's doing the same technology on the back end using, the schemes or the processors APIs behind the scenes. But no, why give them, they've got to switch off point of sale, then they've got to switch off e-commerce, then they've got to switch off, ATM. It's like, why give them those three bits and why give them the warnings? There's a great, you kind of see, a great innovator, I suppose, if you look at Amazon and Jeff Bezos' day one letter for the internet, and each year those themes. One of the things that Amazon work towards is, don't deliberate over easily reversible decisions. And I think too often you see banks, culturally or technology or process or whatever that is, kind of spend a long time getting something in rather than deploying it, learning from the customers. Yes, customers like that. No, they don't. Refine. And that's what the fintechs do very well. So they get that customer feedback and they realize and they refine. And I think too often the banks are kind of slow to do it in terms of deployment. They're getting better, getting faster. It is hard because they're almost protecting, as you said, Jazz, that they're protecting 100 years of brand and trust and so on. So actually, they can't afford an outage. They can't afford for it not to work and and for it to go wrong. And that kind of almost then hampers the speed at which they deliver and innovate and change it. And they're hampered by the fact they've got that wide customer base. So look, if you're a Starling or a Monzo customer, you have a smartphone. You have to by definition. So they've not got to worry about an 85-year-old who doesn't like to use a telephone. They may well have an 85-year-old customer, but they're comfortable with a smartphone. So I think in a way that's another advantage that the fintechs have.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're also navigating 100 years of technology and 100 years of that evolution through different phases of technology, whereas a lot of the recent fintechs have kind of benefited from, like, this is how we do things. We use these set of technologies. We're API first, and this is how we design interfaces. Whereas lots of the banks have had to kind of go through these, monumental shifts in technological evolution. And now we're at another point where you've got fintechs kind of really lightning rod of good UX and UI, and banks are like, how do we do this? It will take them time, but I guess it's very difficult to kind of move that tanker in the right direction.
I think as well, to play almost devil's advocate, I feel like, yes, there are, like, if you think of incumbent banks, it's such a large number of different companies and they have so many different characteristics. And there are some banks which have like decent UX experiences, and there are some that have terrible UX experiences. But there are some which have like good, decent experiences, and then the ones that don't, I think we all know, and like it's something that everyone discusses in terms of like what are the challenges that banks have. There's like all the legacy tech that you have to sort out, build on top of. Do you even have the like access to all the data that you need in order to provide people like decent analytics that are actually useful for them to use? Do you have like the testing process set up so that you can test really quickly? What's your release cycle like? How, like, is that really manual? Is the process really extensive? All of these things which like build up and build up and build up, which means that they're always playing catch up. I think also there's this risk aversion in terms of, which like you mentioned as well, Mark, in terms of reputational risk. And when I've done projects with banks before, what's been really interesting is you show them like, this is how the fintechs are doing it. And the response is always, show me how a bank is doing it. Like, I want to see how a company that has the same challenges that I have, or the same customers that I have, and all the same issues, who are doing a good job. Show me what they're doing, because that's an easier sell for me than it is to say, oh look, this fintech's doing this really cool thing. Let's go and chase after that product or that feature. So yeah, I think number of challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point though. To I think in $1 million listing, it's like it's a comp. So you're buying a flat, and there's a listing price, and you want a comp, you want a comparable, same size, same location, same kind of features and amenities. So I think for banks to go, show me a bank that's doing it. Like, yeah, I see a fintech do it.
But I think you'll see. In fact, I can just about. It's hard to do it backwards. You can see that one there. Maybe you can read it. Bo. Bo was a great example of a failed, in effect, greenfield fintech startup here, under the NatWest group. Why did it fail? It was using different, wasn't hampered by the late, fear. In my mind, it kind of failed because of culture, because actually it didn't look and feel like a fintech. The onboarding was still clunky, even though they're able to kind of, so it didn't offer the same sort of, features, user experience as the proper fintech challenges. Look, we've seen a graveyard of fintechs as well. There's quite a few that have not succeeded. You know, and there's some skeptics in me that say, you know, I'm not sure the likes of Chase will be successful in the long term. Huge brand. I don't think it resonates with the UK consumer. Be great. It can get customers while you're giving away huge interest rates and cash back, but I'm not sure those customers will stay around. But you know, it's personal opinion, isn't it, in terms of what user experience you want, or what's important to you, or what you like or don't like. Maybe you want it to be clunky. You want it to feel like the service you get in the branch. Maybe, perhaps.
I think also, like, when I was thinking about, like, what are the fundamental differences between like a typical bank UX and a fintech, I was also thinking about, like, why are they different? So like with fintechs, with challengers, they have, because their entire business model and business strategy is on customer acquisition, their UX has to be better than whatever is in the market currently, because people don't like change. I mean, obviously the younger generation are more open to switching bank accounts, more open to trying new products, but essentially people don't like to really to change what they're doing if it's working okay for them. So in order to convince people to switch over to you, you really have to offer something that's either easier or faster or cheaper and just like remarkably better than whatever else it is that they're using currently. Like Wise, for example, has done amazingly because they made international transfers really cheap and really easy to do, whereas the banks didn't.
Well, and that's, I think, the interesting point you raised there, Hannah, because you can kind of look at this and it's, look, gone are the days of kind of the way people chose bank accounts. You know, mum and dad take you down, you open a savings account. Maybe it's when you're at university, who's giving you the biggest interest-free overdraft, whatever that is. You know, opening an account now is downloading an app and trying it out, and maybe you don't stick with it. Maybe you don't even load any money in, whatever. There's lots of churn in that funnel that can happen along the way.
The evidence is right behind you, Mark. The number of cards the evidence
is
right behind you, Mark.
I mean, look, that's not normal, is it? But people are more of that mindset that maybe they have a number of different accounts for different reasons. And that's, you know, open banking will change some of that as well. That, well, maybe I can do that. Maybe actually it's easy for me to have one for foreign spending, one for the high interest rate, one for savings, whatever. And I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic in terms of kind of what is it that people are trying to achieve from that sort of banking relationship. You know, one of the other things we look at is current account switching stats. And actually, if you look underneath that, it's just a money grabbing game between the big banks. Who's offering 150 or 200 quid this quarter to switch your account? People are just switching around. Actually, Starling and Monzo essentially don't offer any incentives. And they, for a number of quarters now, have been the biggest net gainers consistently. So actually, there's an element of people are talking, oh, who do you bank with? Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, I really recommend them. And that's kind of changing. Well, I'll try it out. I might download the account. Oh, I really like that. It's got that feature, like I can do a savings pot, or I've got this, that, and the other. And actually, that's what creates some of the switching, not the 150 or the 200 pounds that take it in for 12 months and then move on to the next one. And I say, look, I see Dan in the comments saying Chase is great. Again, the question would be why? What is it? Is it because it's the 1% cashback, the 5% savings rate? If it doesn't have that, is it still great? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I love the fun fact from Olivia in terms of Bo. Yeah, what a stupid name. sorry, people from NatWest Group.
Slamming Bo right now. Yeah, I guess there's a question from Dan, going back to APIs, open finance, open banking, open everything. What more can banks and governments do in terms of API orchestration using a trust framework? And maybe this touches on the point about portable digital identity, you know, reducing that eKYC friction and being able to set up a bank account, like using a Google Authenticate to click a button and port KYC over. What are your thoughts on API orchestration and trust?
I'm happy to dive in first. Look, in some respects, is that the brand? Is that the trust element that the bank can really play in? So do they become the gatekeepers, the people who are trusted? Actually, they're about guarding the identity, and maybe that's kind of how they start to play more of a role, perhaps. I think the one thing that's very clear in terms of of where, open banking's a horrible term anyway from a customer perspective. I don't want my banking to be open. I want it to be very secure. But that's by the by. But I think if we get to a place where there is some type of identity framework, who's best placed to do that? Is it government? Does it become a hygiene factor like we see in other markets? Is it a bank that can operate that? Would we trust a Monzo or Starling to do it? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think that trust element is the biggest issue. I mean, for me personally, because I'm a bit of a nerd, I would love to see all of my data in one place and it all be connected. But you speak to your average person on the street and they're like, no way, I do not want that. I don't want to have a digital ID. It really scares me that my data could be passed around or used. I don't understand how any of this works. So I feel like there's this huge education piece that needs to be done to build trust just amongst regular people who don't go around thinking about what open banking is, probably don't even know what the term means in most cases.
Yeah, but I remember when Apple,
I totally agree. Yeah.
When Apple brought out Touch ID, and especially when they brought out Face ID, lots of pushback. Don't like the idea of that. Look, he won't be subscribing to this. I'm sorry, Marketa, but my father-in-law won't be watching this this event, 70 odd. But he doesn't use a banking app. Okay, he doesn't use Face ID or Touch ID on his phone because he's a bit of a skeptic on that side. And you've got those kind of generations. So how do you bring them along? And it is a challenge, I think, in terms of digital inclusion generally. In terms of how people move along. And I think that's maybe shifting the conversation, maybe giving big banks some credit. There's some really good examples, I think, of where they've got the ability to shine over and above some of the fintechs. So if you were to look, let me be fair to NatWest, being able to go into the NatWest app and do a live Zoom chat with a member of staff, that's pretty cool. Or schedule a Zoom chat. That's something that isn't being offered by a Revolut, etc. To speak to a person's really, really hard. So actually, that's where they've perhaps got that ability to kind of offer something different. Which says actually you want to speak to someone. Here you go. Here's the option. I'm giving you a truly multi-channel approach.
I guess that's using their size and experience to their advantage, because you have over the course of 30, 40, 50 years since money laundering regulations and these banks have been in play, you learn pitfalls, loopholes, how to do things right. You build up these standard operating procedures, and you have a big customer service team you can train up to kind of navigate customers through this, through issues they're having. But I guess it takes us on to another area, which is what area of banking apps, could be fintechs, could be traditional banks. Do you think need the biggest improvement when it comes to UX? I think about UX across origination, putting a customer in, onboarding them, things like payments and account management. I think probably transaction analytics, spending analytics, and customer support, and maybe even with this news about, God, mention his name, Nigel Farage, offboarding potentially as well. So yeah, what area of those do you think needs the biggest improvement?
I would actually so onboarding, which I kind of spoken about already around being able to do eKYC, but I think actually the point that Mark just made around being able to book a Zoom call in an app with a real person is really important. I don't feel, and anyone in the audience who's got examples of really good customer support in banking apps, feel free to chuck them in. But every time I've gone for customer support, I don't feel like I've had a good experience. I think when there's chatbots, usually the chatbots are really clunky, they're really slow. You're basically just trying to gamify the chatbot so that you can actually speak to a real person. Then when you speak to a real person, they take ages to reply. So you're there like 2 hours later, then you forget about it, they leave the chat, you don't get your problem resolved.
Yeah.
And I think figuring out, there's a lot of talk at the moment around Gen AI, what that means for the future of jobs, and especially people who are in those sort of customer support roles. I don't think there will ever be a time when we don't sometimes want human to speak to a human, and especially when it comes to money. Like if you're making a huge decision, like I recently got bought my first flat, because I live in London. So recently bought my first flat. And when I was going through the application process, I was like, I want to speak to it. This is a huge decision. This is a huge amount of money to borrow as well. And I really want to speak to an actual human being about this to get there. I'd like to tell me about what the process is going to be and guide me through it and give me advice and all of those things. So in my view, there needs to be some sort of way to have this sort of automated or Gen AI or intelligent sort of service, but also be able to dial up these sort of human moments at the points that you really, really need them, like when it's these huge, big life things, or just when you want to speak to someone and don't want to speak to some sort of weird bot somewhere.
Yeah. Do you think this is where, because I mean, this is my opinion, I think banks are best placed to do this because they have that, that behind the digital wall team of expertise, or at least people who have some level of expertise to advise you. Do you think this is where banks could step up and kind of go ahead of fintechs in terms of a customer experience?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of if you've got a huge customer support team and that you've already hired, and the question is, okay, so what do I do with it if I want to use Gen AI, but I have to also think about these people's jobs? It's like, how do I upskill these people so that they retain their jobs and then are able to impact customers and offer them advice or offer them guidance at the times that really matter to them? So I think banks are really well placed to be able to offer that type of support.
Yeah, but I guess it's a business decision as to whether they actually do that or not.
Yeah, I'd maybe disagree with Hannah on this, I suppose. Yes, they've got the people. I think the people are probably hampered by legacy to connect all that together. So I think the idea of being able to sort of seamlessly hook up that person that's perhaps sitting in the branch and not doing anything right now, and they can talk live to a person, I think that's almost the join that's very hard. I completely agree with you that ability to kind of intelligently work with the customer to solve their problem. Now, look, I think there's generations growing up that don't want to speak to people. So I agree that we might say, actually, I want to speak to a human being, but maybe the 12 or the 13-year-olds, when they come to get a mortgage, not that they will because they don't buy houses, but actually they probably don't want to speak to someone. I know from my own experience, again, if I've got some type of customer service query, I probably would rather do a live chat when I can be doing other stuff than waiting on the phone for 10 minutes to then pick up a phone to speak to someone who's not the right person and so on. So again, I think that's a shift and a change that's happened. But I think those that are able to kind of switch between either, look, someone wants to speak to a person, give them an easy route to speak to a person. Someone is happy to talk to a really intelligent chatbot. And, you see stats coming out from, I think, Bank of America this week, or if you look again at NatWest and their Cora chatbot, they're getting much more intelligent. And in fact, go outside of banking a second. I saw an article in the FT a few weeks ago about Octopus Energy and saying they were starting to experiment with AI, and they got supervised by a human, but they got the AI to start responding to customer emails. And within the space of about 3 months, it was doing the work of about 240 people. And you might go, okay, but is it good work? And actually, it was getting, I think, 85% scoring compared to 65% for the human equivalents. So actually, the technology is moving to a place where, is it a clunky chatbot you're talking to, or is it actually something that's sophisticated enough that it's learning, and as the data's getting thrown in, it's able to know exactly what you're doing when you've turned up in the app, and actually present you the right choices and right decisions. So I kind of think those firms that are able to leverage this sort of growing use of technology are probably going to be best placed. And the skeptic in me probably says the bank's going to struggle to do that, I think. Partly because it might say, "Oh, that feels risky, conduct risk, etc., etc." And it's maybe these fintechs that have got a slightly different appetite, perhaps.
Yeah, one of the recent case study use cases that I've seen is from the fintech Nude, which again is another fintech that I really like, but always make sure you Google Nude fintech and not just Nude. because you get some weird stuff coming up otherwise. But they just released this Gen AI use case around how do you help people save for a mortgage, because that's like their whole proposition, or save for a house deposit. And there was like I haven't delved into it that much, but from what I've seen, there was one where it's like, do you want me to help you prepare? You're like a year away from being able to apply for a mortgage. Would you like me to scan your transactions and help you prepare to make sure that you'll pass when you get it, and then give you advice? Some of the transaction names that they picked out were quite funny. So I thought they were hilarious. but like it's the fintech, it's already happening, especially in terms of not so much voice Gen AI, but like in terms of being able to get help conversationally. It's like we're already seeing that happen in the market. But I just think there's always, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I always think there's going to be a time when you do want to speak to a human being.
I think I'm with you, Hannah. I think a blended model with like all top of funnel is an AI filtration layer, and then if you really want to, the old school was you pick up a phone and you just press 0 straight away, or hash to go through the dialing. Press 1 to do this, press 2 to do that.
Yeah, and that's
pick up the phone
so
and press hash
that's where
straight
you
away.
see. So take Starling as an example. You can be having that, and again, this is about, for me, building out that sort of multi-communication interaction with the customer, that user experience, because I might want to be doing live chat, and I don't want that to disconnect. I want the chat history to be there, and so on. But actually, if I get to a point where I want to speak to a human and I'm on Starling, it's got a dynamic 6-digit code that's displayed, that actually I can press to call, I quote that 6-digit number, and I'm in. They know they've done all the ID and V. So actually now I can seamlessly go from, what was perhaps searching FAQs into live chat, into actually talking to a human. Whether I need to see the human or not is another aspect, which again is perhaps where, we could see that shift with those fintechs as well. They may say, well, actually that is what customers want to see. They want the view that they're talking to someone in a in a room or in a bank branch and so on. But yeah, look, again, it's a thing, as I said at the start, everyone's got their own kind of view on what they're looking to do and looking to see. But I do think, even if you just look at how you're, doing your day job or searching for content, or whether you're using voice or whatever that is, should I just be able to ask my phone, how do I cancel my card? What should it do? Well, it should take you to the screen to say, oh, you want to cancel your card? Click here, done. It's and again, that's joining sort of the voice side to kind of what's going on in the background. Or are you ending up in a clunky thing where you're just sending them to generic FAQs? And maybe look in the someone mentioned about the digital world, but maybe in the digital world that we're in, I guess, that, how do you draw that customer service distinction? Maybe it was easy to see, maybe Nationwide will sweep up because they've committed to having bank branches or branches rather for, the next 2 or 3 years. But again, you look at generations, well, are they interested in going to the high street? Are they working from home? So again, even that's maybe going against some of the other cultural shifts that are there.
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, just anecdotally, when's the last time you went to the bank for everyday banking? Let's exclude mortgages, because I think it's a niche and infrequent use case. Just getting that in there before you say it, Hannah. But when's the last time you actually physically went to a bank?
I don't know, because the last time I needed to go to a bank branch, I left the bank, which was in the pandemic, so like 2020, and I had maybe I shouldn't say, anyway, it was with a high street bank, and I had some type of fraud attack on my card, so I called them up, they refunded the money, that all went really smoothly, but then they said, we're going to send a new card to your local bank branch. You'll have to go in person with a passport to prove it's you in order to pick it up, because it's fraud. You have to do this extra layer of whatever. But it was COVID, and that bank branch was 6 miles away, and I live in London, so it's not like I live in a a village where I have to get around, but also I didn't want to have to travel to go to a bank branch, so I actually ended up moving. So yeah, I can't remember the last time I went into a bank branch.
Mine wasn't too long ago. I can date it from this. And actually, I took the kids as a treat after school one day because that's the sort of dad I am. And I said, and the reason I had to go in there is because my mother-in-law had some old £20 notes and £10 notes that were shifting to the polymer. And she didn't want to pay them into her account because she shares it with her husband. Again, I'm comfortable my mother-in-law's not watching this. So she said, will you pay them in so I can keep that anonymous and I don't have, then stuff I can buy on my own without showing my father-in-law. So I took the kids in to the HSBC branch in South Manchester where I live. I haven't been in there for years and years and years, and I didn't recognise it when I went in. And it changed, and it's like, oh, there's a deposit cash in the machine thing. Great. I can just put my card in, drop the cash in. Wonderful. That's a better experience. And then it was spitting out the £10, and I unfolded them and put them back in, and it was having none of it. So paid the 20s in, and I went to the lady at the counter, and I was like, right, it won't pay these £10. She said, oh, that's because they're slightly old and the machine's not calibrated. I said, oh, can I pay them in, please? Oh, we don't have a counter service here. So what am I supposed to do? Go to another branch 3-4 miles away, or go to a post office? So actually that kind of shows that the bank branches are becoming sort of self-service, limited in nature. So, lo and behold, actually, the last time I went into that building was, I think, 3 weeks ago. It's now a Gale's Bakery. So it's now changed. That branch is shut. And it's no wonder it's shut because actually it's not really offering anything of a service nature now. We're pushed into going to a post office or paying in the check digitally anyway. So what's the use case to go into a branch? And is it to try and speak to a mortgage advisor? Maybe, but perhaps it's only open 4 days a week in short hours. So actually you'd rather have a Zoom call. So yeah, maybe to Hannah's point, you want the human interaction, but actually in this world, like we are now, we're not in a physical panel, but this is like being together in a physical panel.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's still a bit of a transitionary period, especially when we're going from physical branches to digital. I think even in those cases, customer experience needs to be a priority for banks. And I personally, I've had that same sort of interaction. I went to the bank with my dad a few weeks ago to deposit some cash, some old £20 notes, and to move some money from one account to another because he has 0 digital banks. And we were kind of popped around from one person to another person to another person. And they said, "Oh, download the app." And I'm like, "He doesn't want to download the app. There's no, it's not mandatory to download the app. We'd like not to do that." And then someone came out of the back and was like, "Oh, this is how you do it. There's only one person in the whole bank who knew how to do the process." So
it's not mother-in-law anecdotes here, but I was going on holiday with my in-laws, and they were going to go and tell the bank that they were traveling. I don't do that anymore. Yeah. That's we shouldn't have that user experience. Just use my mobile phone to know whether I'm traveling. So my mother-in-law went into the bank branch to do exactly that, to say, "I need to tell you I'm traveling," and they directed and said, "No, just use the app. I'll show you how to do it." So actually, even within the bank branch, it's like, what we're going to do is show you how to digitally self-serve. And that's and actually that was a really bad user experience because we were away in Antigua and my father-in-law went to take some cash out, and after a couple of transactions got declined and the card blocked. So actually, despite the fact that they've done that process, hopefully to solve the problem, say make sure your card's used, it didn't seem to work anyway. So again, just shows up, I guess, those sort of bad mix of processes with physical and digital. But yeah, enough. I won't give any more mother-in-law or father-in-law anecdotes.
Yeah, and I guess there's a question around. We've talked about customer experience and onboarding payments accounts, customer service. But what do you consider some good ways to measure how well an organization is managing their customer experience? I think there's some generic metrics like customer satisfaction, CSAT, CES, NPS scores. But what would you consider good strategies to measure good customer experience across the whole life cycle?
Interesting. I think it's like speaking to customers, being able to do research with customers, seeing how easy they find the app to use, seeing how intuitive it is to use, getting feedback from them. I just think in terms of monitoring how well you're doing, the best feedback you can get is literally by sitting down with people and asking them what their challenges are, what they enjoy, what's going well, and what they think that you should change.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you on that point. I think it's a mix of that, direct qualitative customer interviews with existing customers, with prospective customers who dropped off the journey, maybe CSAT, NPS scores, Trustpilot scores, and massive surveys to maybe get some wide-scale numbers on it. But there's also things like in-app metrics, drop-off rates. You can blend all of these together and get a really good picture as to where things are going well and where things aren't. Yeah.
Also, one of the things I think the fintechs are really good at is actually building that community. So you've got like Monzo community, there's Revolut community, having those spaces where people can give async feedback and request features and like be very vocal about what they like and dislike. And I think that's just an amazing practice in order to get feedback instantly and be able to hear from a huge number of people all at the same time.
Yeah, Nude's a great example, but Yonder is also a really good example of like a rewards credit card that's skyrocketing, and that's all kind of community led growth. Mark, what about yourself? What do you think? Oh, just on Dan's point, I miss the tangibility of notes and coins. I agree.
That's some of what the pots are doing, aren't they? Putting an image of the holiday you're saving for, trying to create some of that physical side to it. Look, I agree. I mean, all those things you both talked about in terms of customer feedback, absolutely. You can also see that in terms of, I suppose, key metrics. So current account switching stats. So are you getting the customers and are they moving their salary in? Are you gaining the deposits, not by paying through the nose with market leading rates, but being there or thereabouts? I also, to that point, you see a couple of examples, and Monzo's a good one. Barclays do it as well. But having that sort of program to be able to test out new features, so having almost like the beta testers.
Yeah. So
do you want to try the new feature before it's fully released? Is a great way of trying to innovate more, but trying to get that customer feedback in a tangible way. And again, you can look at how well is the chatbot solving queries first time. Because that's a good measure of solving that. That customers, again, seeking that feedback from customers. Did this help you? Did this solve it? Did you do what you're trying to do today? So I think I think that's it. You can't stand still, and I think those banks that we look at that apps haven't changed for a while or don't offer some of the basic things, won't probably be around. Won't be around much longer.
Yeah, great. I think this is a good question to close out, but also maybe a very difficult question to answer. But if you had a blank piece of paper, you were tasked with designing an end-to-end onboarding experience for, let's say, a neobank, what would you consider, like, what approach would you take? What would you consider an ideal approach? I mean, I can start. I would say, you've obviously referenced jobs to be done. I'd say a very thorough initial discovery process, clear customer personas, clear success metrics. Again, a very clear blended support model, and those are a few things I use to like start the neobank, and then use some of those measures to start scaling up, and a bit of that community led growth, like Hannah said. What about yourself, Hannah? What would you do?
Really, like similar to what you said around the discovery, but really finding what that hook is going to be that's going to make customers want to join your company, sign up for your app. I think like there's some really interesting fintechs that are out there at the moment that are solving really niche problems, and finding out what those problems are and where they aren't being served, and then offering something that's better, cheaper, faster, easier, all of those things. Like that's how you're going to win the customers.
Yeah, and I think even just on that point, there's some fintechs doing exactly the same as another fintech, but with a very unique tone of voice and pitch to a very specific customer set. Features are very similar, but like you said, it's that they're targeting a specific customer set. Tone of voice, colors, UI is all different, but they're niching out a bit.
Yeah, I'd kind of agree with that. I think it's about the evolution as well. So again, to that point, many fintechs have been failed. Those that have succeeded, why? And again, it's what's the point of difference. So I think the sooner you can get out there, get real customer feedback, understand the problems they're facing, the more you can create that sort of longevity. And I think that's the other thing. Anyone will download an app, will they use it? Will they add money? Will it be profitable for you? So I think that's about that journey to go on with the customers.
Okay, awesome. I think let's bring it to a close there. And thanks, Mark. Thanks, Hannah, for your great insights. I guess stay tuned for more from Marketer and API Chronicles. And for any questions that weren't answered, I might spend a bit of tomorrow going through and just answering them via chat once it gets published back on LinkedIn. So don't worry, I'll try and answer the questions later. And I think maybe Mark and Hannah will jump in as well.
Super.
That's good.
Thanks
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.